Hi, my name is Linda Edowich with William Ravis Real Estate right here in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I'm bringing you a weekly update on what's going on with the Glastonbury Market. So this week I want to take a look at it, and when I looked at it, I went a little bit deeper than I normally do to give you some really interesting data so far and what we look like going into the fall. So far, we have 51 houses that are currently active on the market, and of those, 32 are resales, which I like to call pre-loved homes. And 19 of those are new construction. Super excited to see all the new construction. There are some subdivisions, and then there's some, scattered throughout the town as, single construction only. And those are priced between $600 and $1.2 million. So for new construction, that's really what you're looking at, going over 600. You're probably more on average in that 700 and the high 700 range for new construction. So far this year, we had 317 homes that have already closed. Those are done, off the books. 84 more are under contract. Compare and contrast that with what happened last year. 471 single family homes sold last year. So we are really going to look at closing out this year far above where we were last year. And that sounds interesting because we've been saying there's low inventory, but there's such a high buyer demand. So that's really what's happening is low inventory. Yes, we can't meet all the buyers that are out there. So there's definitely a lot of buyers. So one would definitely look at that and say for sure we're going to close more homes this year than we did last year. So I did look at some really interesting data. I was recently on an appointment for a home that would be listed somewhere in the $600,000 to $700,000 range. And I thought it would be interesting to let them know that when we list a house, how much over asking are they on average going to potentially get? Of course, every house is different. Not every house is going to go over asking. But when I did the data, I looked at it and said, oh wow, there's 35 houses between the $600,000 and $700,000 range. And of those, 24 sold over asking on an average of 6% over asking. And now compare that to last year. We had 24 houses that were on the market last year, over 600 to 700,000, and those went over asking about on average 3%. Some houses go way over. They're super popular in that uber popular neighborhood with those public utilities. I like to call the golden trifecta: public water, public sewer, and gas. If you have that and you have a house that has a big giant flat backyard, and throw in a pool, you are going over asking easily over 10% because buyers want that right now, and that's so hard to find. So I went through that last year and I did all that data point for the 300 to 400, the 400 to 500, and I have all the percentages. And so I do have that for those price points. And if you're interested in knowing more about where those houses, that price point landed, feel free to reach out to me. You can DM me, you can send me a quick email or a text message, and I'll happily give you that data. So it's super important if you were thinking about listing your home to know where you list it. As long as you're listing it, appropriately and within the market, you could expect to get over a certain price point for your home, a certain percentage. And likewise for a buyer, that's super great data for you, because when you're in a multiple offer, you want to know on average, what is the average buyer willing to go over asking to win that house? And that's great data to have. And so always work with an agent who is the broker of knowledge, that knows their market inside and out, that's going to be able to help you with all of that information so you can make an informed decision for what will be probably your biggest purchase. My name is Linda Edowich, and I'm with William Ravis Real Estate right here in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I would love to find you a new home this year. Thank you. Hi, it's Linda, and today is the question of the week. I recently had somebody ask me, so why would I hire you as opposed to my friend who just got their real estate license? And I said, well, because I have a lot of knowledge from all the years experience that I have. I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two, to quote the famous farmers insurance commercials. And that's true. When you are working with an agent, you want to work with an agent that has seen a lot, has gone through the trenches and battled out, problem after problem after problem. In addition to having some great deals just coast to close with no issue at all. That's super important. How I recently helped one of my buyers, we were under contract. We used the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors contract, and that contract has a lot of contingencies built in to protect the buyer. I would argue probably not a lot to protect the seller, and a seller just can't unilaterally say, I want out of the contract. If the buyer's in default, then yes, an argument could be made that they could initiate a termination. But as long as the buyer isn't in default and has given a mortgage commitment, that's free of contingencies, timely, I think that the seller pretty much has to go straight through to closing. And in particular was this particular case where I had a buyer that asked for some closing cost credits towards getting some inspections done. And the seller wasn't willing to give what the amount was and instead offered something far less. So my client instead said, well, then I want you to do the physical work instead of giving the closing cost credit. So the seller claimed that we renegotiated and therefore the deal was null and void because we didn't accept their first offer of the $2,000 closing cost credit instead of the work. So while we were trying to figure that out, the seller basically said, you either accept my $2,000 by 6:00 p.m. or we're going to get out of this deal. Immediately I called an attorney to try to get them in on it, and I called our mortgage person to see if we could in fact get the $2,000 closing cost credit instead of the physical work done to the property. And that takes time. You can't get that done by 6:00 at night or within an hour. So we spent a little while on the phone that evening with an attorney who thought perhaps the seller was correct that, because my client didn't accept their offer of the credit and we offered instead for them to do the work, that we renegotiated, we made a counter offer that was unacceptable, and therefore the seller could get out of the deal. The Connecticut Association of Realtors and the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors, their boilerplate language on their contracts does not state that at all. And that was the agreement that we had executed with all parties. So we waited till the next morning to call our mortgage person and just verify the credits. And in terms of waiting for them to to get up and get to work, at 9:00 in the morning, I got on my computer and at 8:00 in the morning found that the seller agent had sent me a termination and said, you're done. We are not selling the house to you because you did not accept our offer of the $2,000 closing cost credit, and we are not going to sell to you. And we had built in quite a lot of time to finish our inspections, and we were still well within that time frame. So there was no way that seller could just unilaterally say they weren't going to sell to my client. And by the next morning, we got a phone call from the attorney who read the contract and said, you know what, you're right. It doesn't say anything in there at all about, doing a counteroffer on inspections and being able to get out of the deal. So we really had the seller over a barrel, so to speak, and they had to sell the house to us. We went all the way to closing without them wanting to give us that $2,000. They absolutely refused until the day of closing. We got to the closing table and my client happily walked out there with an extra $2,000 check because they were able to secure that because they had an agreement already signed by the seller that was given to us saying, we'll give you the $2,000 closing cost credit. So it's super important to have an agent really know the contract, the ins and outs of it, and have seen a thing or two, and have really great resources in which to refer to and tap somebody's shoulder when you need a little bit of help. So that goes to talking about, a real estate agent and, how deep is their bench? How many people do they have on that bench that can help support you as a buyer or seller when you're trying to buy or sell a home here in Connecticut? And that's my answer to my question of the week this week. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me in a DM or send me an email and I'll answer your question too.